What's up, Rolos? Welcome to the Millennial Rolodex. This is a new episode. I hope you're all cozy, all snowed in, or maybe not snowed in. But actually, that was a perfect segue because even though I didn't say anything, how can a segue be? If you don't say anything, how can you have a good segue? And the answer to that is it's an emotional segue. So we're all gonna segue. If you're not in New York or haven't don't understand New York weather, which if you're not in New York, you shouldn't know anything about New York weather. We've had our second blizzard of the season, of the snow winter season, and now it snowed a little bit today, and it's pretty snowy out there. I will say, since it is a little warmer than the last blizzard that we had, which was, I would say, a couple weeks ago. At this point, I don't know. It just feels like an onset. It feels like every day is a blizzard. But whereas last time there was a blizzard, it was like 0 degrees out, and then all the snow just it froze, so none of it melted. This time it's a little warmer, so some of it's melting now, and that's not bad. But we had a blizzard 2 days ago, and I wake up this morning and it's snowing again. So I guess we live in the North Pole. I was unaware of that. That's what happens. It hasn't snowed in a while here, honestly, in New York. It hasn't snowed this much in some years. So how everybody is thinking is two thoughts. One, it all was holding up. It was constipated and it all came down. Or number two, which is my favorite, and I think most of us really think is the government's definitely controlling the weather, guys. And that's just a fact. It's actually funny because more people have come up to me, and I'm obviously a conspiracy theorist. And if you want to say conspiracy theories, which I think they're just, let's stop saying CTs, conspiracy theories. I'm gonna shorten it, CTs, and let's just say that these are theories that a lot of them are proven true, I would say. So I had a couple people tell me that the government is making it snow a lot more than I would have thought, and that's something that, hey, listen, I'll put it as a possibility, but I think it's very interesting that how people are really distrusting our government and our just society as a whole. That more and more people are believing that the government is controlling the weather, which it is weird. Side note, it is weird that we had for about 2-3 weeks frozen mountains of snow. Then the snow melts, and the very next day, all the snow is gone. We get another blizzard, and they were both on from Sunday night into Monday. So that's so uniform. So you could call it the government. You could say another theory is that the universe is in this interesting cycle, and Mother Nature is just going through this great conscious cleanse of itself. Who knows? Who knows? But there's definitely some energy out there. Whether you choose to believe, or what you choose to believe, is what you believe. And you're right. Regardless, you're right. So that being said, the government made it snow, and I think the government is cranking up the AC these next couple weeks as well, because I think it's gonna snow again. So that's your weather report. That's your New York weather report. If you're in New York, you're welcome. If you're not in New York, you're welcome, because it keeps you updated. It gives you something to talk about around the water cooler. So yeah, your boy's a little sick. Yesterday, so the blizzard was 2 days ago. Yesterday, it wasn't a blizzard, so it was the day after the blizzard. And naturally, all of the trains, all the transportation, all the roads were wrecked during the blizzard, so nobody really could get into work the next day. And this is what you gotta love about New York. If it is not actively a monsoon catastrophe weather situation, just moments after the weather being a wreck, your ass better be getting to work, because your job does not care that it was just a couple of moments ago, it was a catastrophe snowstorm, and now it's clear. You better get to work. You better get on. You better put the tennis rackets on your shoes. You better get the Jamaican bobsled team going. You better get some huskies, a couple husky dogs, and a sled, and get your ass into work, because that's just what it is. So yesterday, that's obviously I'm joking around, I'm being facetious, but yesterday I was like, you know what? It's not snowing. There's limited. I'm on Long Island. I work in the city. There's limited. There's a train. There's one train from my stop into the city. So you know what? I'll make my way into work today, even though the roads are crazy. So I make the one train from my stop, and let's go through. This is me venting a little bit. Let's go through a scenario. If it's not a blizzard anymore and a bunch of people need to make it into the city, and there's one train running from that stop, is the train true or false? We'll do true or false. Is true the train is going to be packed, and there's going to be a bunch of people on the platform waiting to get on the packed train, or B, nobody's going to be on the train at all? If you chose A, you are correct. So the train was packed, running 30 minutes late, which it already was an hour behind schedule, because it was like one train. It was one train, so it wasn't even really a schedule. It was just one train that was coming in at 7. I have to be in work at 8, which probably a lot of people do. And it wasn't going to the stop that I get off, but another stop. So it's already 30 minutes late, not going where I want it to go. I'm going to have to transfer at Jamaica, which is the stop in the middle, and then get out, and it's already packed, ready, running 30 minutes late, and then everybody and their mom is on the platform trying to get onto the train, right? It's also freezing. It's also below freezing. It's not single digits, but it's 30 degrees or under. Actually, it was under 30 degrees because it was early. So below freezing temperature. So we're all waiting there. We pack onto the train, and as the train's going, I'm standing up. I didn't get a seat, obviously, which is fine. I got on the train and transfer at Jamaica. Only then do I realize that it's still not going where I needed to go. So I get back on another train that was coming in the same direction that the original train was that I got off of. And I get on, and I have to stand because it's packed again like sardines. And I make it into work 20 minutes late. Get off at Penn Station and walk 20 blocks. So here's what I'm saying. I think that's what got me sick, guys. And also, as I'm on the train, and that was just a setup kind of to vent my frustrations, but also I'm on the train, right? And I've been trying to practice this thing where I don't listen to, I don't put earphones in. So I'm breathing. I'm sitting there thinking, meditating, because I've been trying to meditate more every day. Just get my clarity, my mental clarity there. And I do feel it's funny because I am recording a podcast and put a podcast out there, but I am feeling that I do listen to podcasts and shows still, but if I do it on like constantly, if I'm constantly plugging things in my ears, or just having things that catch my attention, that are not catching my attention, but require me just to listen to, rather than me understand and think my own thoughts, then my mental clarity is all over the place. So I've been not consistent, like I don't have something continuously in my ears, just playing and with somebody else's voice. But I am still listening to podcasts and stuff, and I'm still on YouTube and stuff, but I'm not, this video's over, let me listen to another video. I'm starting to just meditate more and think more my own thoughts, and trying to get my own, like I said, mental clarity there. So I'm standing up on the train, and I'm just smiling to myself, which people must think I'm crazy, because I'm smiling and just like shaking my head. We're all packed on there like sardines, and I'm just like, all of us are packed here dealing with this miserable commute to get into the city, to get into work, and probably a job that we really, not that we hate, but it's like, this is all just to get to a day's work. All to get to a commute to a day's work. In the snow, in the cold, in the latenesses, all of this just to get to work. And I just was laughing because I'm like, what is this all about, man? What are we all doing here? Like, everybody's annoyed, everybody's frustrated, people are getting sick, i.e. me yesterday. Probably a lot more people, probably cold and flu season part 2 over here. And it's just so funny. I'm just thinking, like, what is it we're all like rushing in to get to work, or we're all like trying our hardest to get to work? And it's so funny because as New Yorkers, I think, and I think other places too, but that's what gives us that like weird grit, is that we deal with, and our personality, like a New York state of mind is like, it doesn't matter, just get your ass to work. That realness, that rawness of, it just snowed, it's freezing, and you have to be packed in a container with other people that are miserable right now, getting into work or getting into a place that they're not that thrilled to go anyway. And we're all just there like the next day after I think I read it was like the top 10 biggest snowstorms to hit Central Park like ever. So one of the biggest snowstorms, and we're standing there on a train, late, standing up, freezing, pushed up against each other. It's so funny. It's such a funny thought process. Like, what are we all doing? What is this all for? Where are we all going in the grand scheme of things? So I thought that was funny. And that's also what makes New York, New York. And also that kind of, I guess it's like nothing mandatory, but that kind of suffering is like, I think we need that discomfort a little bit, like that doing something that we really don't want to do in such a uncomfortable, extreme way, physically, mentally, emotionally, that that's good for you, because it just makes you like, I don't know, it's just like, it makes things like, all right, you can't, not living a life of extreme comfort, of like, oh, it's cold outside, I'm not going to go outside. Not only do you have to go outside, but you have to go to work in this cold, crazy blizzard, mountains of snow weather, and go to a place that you don't necessarily like to work. So I just thought that was funny, and also a necessity. You need that builds a lot of character, I think. So that's my rant on that. If you can understand that. And so let's roll the Rolodex again, Rolos. And the next thing I wanted to talk about was I'm home today, thank goodness. Typically when my body starts to break down, I don't know if this is a thing that maybe your body knows, but I don't know if you guys go through this too, where it's like your body runs as good as it's gonna run if it knows that it has to run. Like, say you're outside. Like yesterday, I'm at work and I have to work for 8 hours, right? So I'm at work and my body's running for 8 hours, but then as I'm coming home, I start to feel like my body's like slowly getting sicker and sicker, and I feel more under the weather, and I'm like, my body gave me the energy to last the day, and now it knows that I'm off these next 2 days. Now it's gonna crash. So I don't know if you guys deal with that, but I think but I definitely feel that, and I feel like our bodies do help us out a lot, and help us push through until we have time to rest, whether it's our Friday and we have off next couple of days or the next day, or if it's the beginning of the week, it's like, all right, you're gonna run on this much energy throughout the week, and then the weekend we're gonna definitely hit you and make you crash. So yeah, I think that that's definitely, our body definitely does help us out in that way, and that's just like, I guess, like a spiritual, holistic kind of thought process. Our body is very interesting, guys. I read this book. I just finished reading this book, The Lives of Cells. I think his name's Lewis Thomas. He was a biologist, and he talks about how not only humans but the entire Earth kind of mimics a cell, and how what our cells do inside of us are pretty much what we do on the Earth, and everything else on the Earth does. So it's kind of like everything is the same, and it really is even though it's a biology book, a science book, it really is kind of a spiritual book. So definitely check that book out. It was cool. It was very comparative to how other animals and a lot of like other insects, how insects react and act like bees and ants, and how kind of we're similar to that, and how our communities are pretty similar to them, and what and just all types of all things that our cells do inside of us, how they communicate is kind of like how everything communicates out in the world. So it was a pretty interesting book, The Lives of Cells, and that kind of goes with my theory of like your body kind of understanding that you're gonna crash soon, so just giving you some of the energy and helping you get through the day until you have time to rest. So I don't know, that just kind of reminded me of that. I don't know, this is a very philosophical podcast, guys. Which brings me, that's a good segue, which brings me to so I watched this documentary called Val. It's about Val Kilmer, and it's so funny because I highly recommend this. I loved this movie. Maybe my favorite documentary, definitely one of my favorite documentaries. And it's so funny because I feel like people say, "Oh, I love watching documentaries," you know. And I always, when I hear that, I'm always like, I don't really love documentaries. But what I do realize is that I love documentaries about topics that I like, or topics that I love and I'm fascinated with. And typically that goes with artistic ones, actors, directors, writers. I love those kind of documentaries. You know, I wouldn't say I like love I love documentaries. Although that being said, if a documentary is done well, you could, and passionately, I do believe that you could love that documentary because of the passion that you see on the screen from the people making it. But typically, I don't know if people aren't passionate about what they're filming or they're uninspired, but I don't love all documentaries. So maybe that's controversial. Maybe that's like, no, duh, you have to like the topic that the documentary is about. But for a very long time, I've noticed that I was like not a fan. Not that I wasn't a fan of documentaries, but it's not like my go-to. And now more and more, I notice myself like looking at specific figures, like people, and I'm like, oh, I want to know more about this person, and watching it. And honestly, it's becoming slowly my favorite, one of my favorite genres. So I watched about Val Kilmer. If you don't know who that is, he's an actor. You millennials will know him. He was kind of, I guess, our first Batman, actually, because he was in Batman. We weren't old enough for the well, I guess some of us were, but the Michael Keaton one. He was he was the first Batman from this generation, but Val Kilmer was the one from when we were younger, where he was in the one with Jim Carrey and Tommy Lee Jones as the Riddler and Two-Face. So you can know him from that. You can know him from as Jim Morrison in the movie The Doors, or the movie The Saint, or the right-hand man of De Niro in the movie Heat, which is probably the most famous one, or actually in the movie Tombstone as Doc Holliday to Kurt Russell's Wyatt Earp. I'll be your Huckleberry. So he's a brilliant actor. He actually just passed away, I think, last year, but he was still alive when the documentary came out. But he had I don't actually know what he passed away of, but he had lung cancer, and then that he got cured and healthy of that, and he had a little, like, it sounds like a trachea, because he had like the thing where you have to touch your throat, this button that they attach to your throat, and so you could talk. So he has that. So essentially what the film is about, the documentary, is he recorded, he had a camcorder his like whole life pretty much, and he recorded pretty much everything in his life. The documentary starts out with him, like, you know, you see him and you see him talking, you know, with the trach, the button, you know, his button in his throat thing, and he's talking that. So he's very active in the documentary, where it's narrating and he's talking also, you know, he's talking, and he's there currently when they were shooting the documentary, but also he has all this archival footage. Oh, he was also in Top Gun too. Sorry, that was a very popular one. Real Geniuses, all these great movies. So he has all of these, all of his archival footage that he shot himself with his camcorder throughout his life, throughout the making of all these movies, throughout the behind the scenes of his not just films but his regular life. He was such a it's so funny because if like you know me, you know, or you listen to the podcast, you know that I love what the kind of stories that I really love are people kind of like in retrospect. Like you feel like what is a life and what is my life become and where is my life? You know, I've said this a bunch of times. And just right off the bat, Val Kilmer is such a lovable person, especially in the documentary, and he's such a charismatic, artistic, spiritual person that you really like fall in love with throughout the film. But just you know, I'm sure you know, he's a famous actor. I'm sure you have your opinion on him. You probably love him. Some people love him. He has so many fans. You know, I don't think anybody hates Val Kilmer, but you know, it's so easy to fall in love with him in the film, in the documentary, but as a person, because it is, you know, a version of himself, or you're seeing this version of himself in a very candid behind the scenes version, you know. And it's so interesting because he has, you know, he passed away recently, and it's like when you're watching all of this footage, you're kind of thinking like, damn, you know, it would have been cool to like meet this soul, meet this spirit, you know, meet this person when he was alive, you know, and really get to know him or have a chat with him and have an exchange of ideas, because he did seem like such a cool, down to earth person and a person filled with love and life, you know. But it was such a I'll be honest with you, I teared up throughout the entirety of the film. And if you want to call that crime, you could call that crime, whatever, I don't care. But it's cool because also too, the film is narrated by what you're like, wow, that sounds like Val Kilmer's voice. How is he narrating this? But then you realize that a young man pops up and it says Jack, my son, like written on it, and then he starts to narrate, and that's his voice narrating the film, and you're kind of like, oh wow, he sounds just like how his dad sounds. So it's pretty cool. And then they go through, you know, they're going through, you know, Comic-Cons and stuff in real time, but then also going back in the archival footage and showing him on interviews and him in acting school and him, you know, him in life. And I'm not going to go through the whole film, but definitely check it out because I highly recommend it. Like I said, it's probably my favorite documentary of all time, at least right now. I love the film. So just took a sip of my delicious counter coffee, Apollo. It's the name of it, Apollo. Counter. I forgot. Wow. I don't know. I just had a brain lag right there. But it's a country counter coffee, Apollo. Sorry. That's the brand. Great brand of coffee. So I digress. So definitely watch the film. Definitely it just has like the access of it and everything is you know, all the archival footage. He was one of the biggest actors, A-list actor of his time, and so you get like all this really raw, great footage. He was such a beautiful artistic mind. You really get a sense of the person, of how like he seemed sweet and gentle, but then he also seemed like a very strong and artistic individual who was searching for the truth in life. And actually in the beginning of the movie, he says, I'm going to paraphrase a lot here, but he's sitting in the chair, you know, in the present time. And he's like, I want people to understand me through this archival footage of me. And I know like that's not a possibility. And I know that I can't convey it through this archival footage. And then he goes, I know that's not true. So he kind of contradicts himself right there, but that's how I feel, you know? And it's just like, you could see this creativity and this artistic mind, you know, going through this thought process of like, how can I convey who I am truly through this archival footage, you know? And I think that's probably how we all feel, right? Like, how can I convey myself fully to you use you as anybody? How can I convey myself fully to the world, what I'm trying to do, and I'm really not being? Or how can I make you understand me the best? And that's what we do with expressing ourselves, right? With anything. Like, that's what this podcast is about. That's what your work is about. That's what your marriage is about. Your relationships. That's what everything's about. How can we convey ourself the best that we can to each other? And that's kind of like what he throws at you in the beginning of the film, which I thought was beautiful. And then, so I'm not gonna go through his whole life, his whole thing, but I'm gonna go through a couple takeaways. A couple beautiful moments in the film that I thought that really stuck with me, that I just wrote down. And so definitely check it out. If I gave it, like I said, I usually give films. Wasn't for me. I liked it. I loved it. One of my faves. I'm gonna say this is one of my faves just because of Val Kilmer. You love him, and then all the archival footage and the way that it was shot was just beautiful. So definitely one of my faves. That's where I would put that in the category. And then so it's so funny because we talk about like emotions and like how we feel and how we want to like convey ourselves. So it's actually in one of the archival footages of Val Kilmer in acting school, and he's in front of his class, and he's in a seat, and he's breaking down one of his performances that he just gave. I think it was in Hamlet, where he's talking about I thought about killing myself, or I want to kill myself, or something, a part of Hamlet. And then he's like shaking in the scene, and then he's sitting down breaking it down. His acting teacher's like, "You're physically shaking. Why were you physically shaking?" And the acting teacher was funny. The acting teacher was a very actor-y kind of teacher, but he seemed like a cool guy. Very different than Alan, my acting teacher, who was very calm and articulate, but this guy seemed very much more theatrical. So his acting teacher goes, "Why were you shaking when you were saying that?" And then Val Kilmer goes, a young Val Kilmer, before he was in any movies, he goes, "I never had these thoughts. I never had the thoughts when I say I'm gonna kill myself. I took it as a real, like, I'm gonna kill myself, and I never had those thoughts in real life before." And then the acting teacher kind of stops him and goes, and he's like, "Well," he's like, you have had those thoughts before." And he's like, yeah, well, as a character, I'm really having those thoughts." He's like, "No." And then the acting teacher stops and says, "If you have these thoughts, even in character, you've had these thoughts before. You've had all the thoughts. You could have all the thoughts. Any thought that's out there, you've had." The reason why that stuck with me was one of the reasons that, I took acting classes, and I just think in general in our everyday lives, you have all the thoughts. All these thoughts, they're not separate. We don't all have, some people think this, some people think this, some people think this. You are capable and have had, like I said, like if I say, what does it feel like to be burned alive? You're like, I've never thought of that before. Well, you just thought about that just now. That thought process is in all of us, and we're all connected, and we all share these things. That's why I think, like, in our world now, we kind of other each other, because we think like, I don't think that way, you think that way. No, we all think every type of way. It's all inside of us, man. We all have that expression inside of us. It's just we don't act upon it, or we do act upon it, but it's all there. So to explore all these facets of yourself in the human mind is really what acting's about, but expression's about, however you express yourself. So I thought that was really interesting when he says, "No, you had these thoughts before. You always have these thoughts," because we all have. We're it's gonna sound hippity dippity, but I am a hippie. We have infinitive thoughts inside of us. You have any thought you like honestly, next time you talk to somebody, be like, "What's the weirdest thought you have right now?" Go. You right now, what's the weirdest thought you've had? Think about it right now. Say it out loud if you're by yourself or next to somebody. See what happens. Because we all have these weird thoughts, but we all contain it inside of us. And it's like you've had every thought. You could have every thought. If I'd say, if you read a sentence, you've had that thought now. Now that you've had that thought. Not you're going to do it or you want to do it, but you've had that thought before. So I thought that was really cool. That was one of the first little takeaways. That was and he was a funny guy because he was very what you think about an acting teacher, very theatrical. He was that. So that was cool. And he was. It's funny because he also played Jim Morrison, which was one of the like. I mean, you talk about a biopic. That performance he was Jim Morrison. He might have been more Jim Morrison than Jim Morrison was Jim Morrison. Honestly, you could say Jim Morrison was pretending to be something too, pretending to be Jim Morrison. But that was a stellar performance, and so he was talking about like trying to capture an ethereal feeling. How do I capture this guy? And he quotes this writer Yeats, however you eat. Yates, maybe is how you say it. Yeats, these young kids. Yates, he quotes and he says, and he's taught, and the writer is very prolific. I think he was a poet and a writer. And he says, when you look at a tree and you're in the presence of a tree, you have this feeling of the tree, this thing that is like a spiritual like connection. And when you go to try to write down the tree, with how that tree made you feel, you have to describe the tree and write it down, and then it's when the writing stops, that's how you could describe the tree. And I guess that's the ethereal feeling that we're all trying to express, is how this tree makes us feel, right? Or that feeling that we got when we walked into a store or a bar, we met the woman or man of our dreams, or when our child was born. That's the feeling that we're trying to describe, that ethereal feeling, or express. And I thought that was a beautiful little part of it. A little part of the film, he's trying to we're all just trying to like capture. This is like the theme, I guess, of the film, but also the theme of the podcast is like trying to capture what is going on and what this is all about. Similar to going into work when you really don't want to go into work the day after a blizzard, What are we doing here, people? So just the kind of like the last part of the documentary was cut to him doing a one-man show of Mark Twain, the writer. He wrote Huckleberry Finn and he wrote The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. Fun fact, he also wrote this book that I bought to Italy that I didn't really open, which is him. It's called Innocents Abroad, and it's about how he was paid to go to Europe and document and like write about his experience. So I took it to Europe, and I didn't read it, but listen, but I'm gonna read it one day because it is pretty interesting. So Mark Twain was a cool guy, and he was actually a great writer, obviously, and people say like America's best writer that we've ever produced here on state soil. So he does a one-man play of him, and actually it's funny because, and something that I also noticed about all these writers and artists in general are funny, but writers specifically, because I feel like writers are always trying to understand, like, why do we do the things that we do? Like, what is it? Why are we doing all this stuff? Like, what are we trying to do in this society? A question that I can't have on my own, talking to the microphone, but I would like to hear everybody's, like, kind of like what you think life is about. Like, what is the meaning of life to you? Like, what is the meaning of life to all of us? And genuinely, I would like to know, because I find it so fascinating that we don't really talk about that with each other. I think even our most intimate friends, but like, what is it? Like, what is it? That's one of the reasons why I'm on the train, like, laughing. I'm like, what are we doing here, people? Like, what are we accomplishing here right now? Not in like a depressed way, but in like what is this? Like a playful way, a kind of funny way. Like, what is this? This is hilarious. So Mark Twain, he was a writer trying to feel that as well, but also he got into a bunch of debt and had to go on tour, like kind of speaking on stage in front of people, I guess, to pay his debts off, similar to what Val Kilmer was doing as playing him, as playing Mark Twain, paying off his debts and trying to get enough money to make a movie of this Mark Twain play that he wrote, one man play that he wrote. So he's going on tour or whatever, right? And I just wrote down a couple quotes from Val Kilmer playing Mark Twain, and I don't know if Mark Twain said these quotes or Val Kilmer said them, but either way, I'm gonna put them as a combination of Mark Twain saying them via Val Kilmer, or Val Kilmer saying them via Mark Twain. I don't know, but that's how I'm gonna put it. Side note, it's actually kind of funny because I have this book on screenwriting where it's this guy who I think Joel Ingle is his name, and it's Screenwriters on Screenwriting, and it's about him interviewing a bunch of screenwriters. I'm like, why have I never heard of this book before? Is this book real, or is he just making up these this is the thought that I had. Is he just making up these interviews and just writing whatever he wants? And then I thought, like, either way, it doesn't matter because I still like it. I'm getting what I'm getting out of it. So whether Mark Twain said it or Val Kilmer said it, you still get what you get out of it. So one of the quotes was, the first quote actually was, "Human is the only animal that blushes or has to." So we blush because we're embarrassed, and we have to blush because we are embarrassed. That's how I took it, which I thought was funny because no other animal gets embarrassed, just us. And why do we get embarrassed? That's just an interesting idea and quote that I thought. So maybe that's a good thing to think about. Like, why do we get embarrassed as humans? Why do we have to blush? You know, what's so embarrassing about what we do? And I remember actually one time I was in college in one of my classes, and I said something in class, and it felt really embarrassing. And then I turned to my boy in class and I said, "Yo, life is honestly just about how many times you could get embarrassed, isn't it?" And when you think about it that way, like, life is the amount of times that count how many times you get embarrassed, and that's a successful life. I feel like it helps you deal with things a lot better and maybe embarrass yourself a lot more, which is always funner, honestly. Less boring to embarrass yourself. Another quote was, "When you grab a cat by the tail, that's the only way to experience it, or the only way to understand that feeling is to grab a cat by its tail." Now I'm going to paraphrase because I didn't write the whole thing down, but so essentially, like, the only way you could experience grabbing a cat by the tail is grabbing the cat by the tail. And I think that's a funny visual because that is a level of experience of life that you only get by doing it. And whatever happens, now you know, and you can't not know. You can't know it if you don't do it. So you have to grab the cat by the tail to understand whatever's going to happen in that situation. So I thought that was funny. This one's a hilarious one. "The only difference between people that pray in casinos and church is the people that pray in casinos mean it." I thought that was a funny quote. That was also a really hard sentence to say. But I thought that was funny, and such a witty quote. And also, I would say, it really makes you think of the truth of that situation. The people who pray in casinos are truthfully praying, and the people who pray in church maybe aren't always doing that. But they are probably. Some of them are too. All right, but I thought that was funny for the most part. And then this was just like a funny little quote that he was saying. It's a one man play, so he's walking into the audience and he goes, "What's the most important question of all?" And then somebody says, "Why we're here," like yells it out from the audience, "Why we're here." And then in character he says, "Because you paid $70, that's why," meaning the price of admission to the Mark Twain theater show. So I thought that was funny. That was a little funny Val Kilmer moment right there. This is the last Mark Twain quote, and this is how I'm going to end the podcast because I think this is beautiful, and this goes out to everybody, myself, you, everybody around you, and spread this because I really think this is a great quote. "All you need is ignorance and confidence, and success is yours." I love you guys.